Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. 3 articles that I want to take a look at. The first one is about a rocket that flew from the Gaza Strip, and so IDF is retaliating. Iran is also seeking a way to get around U.S. sanctions. They're seeking to get around the U.S. dollar, and I'll speak to why that is potentially related to an economic collapse. And finally, I'm going to talk about the peace plan, the peace deal, and what the Palestinians think of it, what they're doing about it, and the intended date for release of that. So there was a rocket fired recently from the Gaza Strip, and apparently went into the sea. IDF reduces Gaza fishing zone after rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and apparently this was in retaliation to the sanctions against Iran. The IDF will reduce the fishing zone around Gaza to 6 nautical miles Tuesday following the launch of a missile by Palestinian Islamic Jihad Monday night. It says the Islamic Jihad launched from the Al-Atra neighborhood from Bet Lahia in northern Gaza Strip towards the Mediterranean Sea. It was intentionally fired by the group, it says. The PIJ, the military said, is trying to carry out low-level attacks and maintain a low profile so that Hamas doesn't figure out that they are trying to undermine the ceasefire efforts between the ruling group and the coastal enclave and Israel. So they're trying to stir up some stuff. I don't know if there's disagreement by Hamas and what Iran wants to do, but it seems Iran is wants to keep the tensions going, and I'm sure Iran would be happy if Hamas and the other terror groups just went off on their own and just started, attempting to fire all the missiles they can on Israel. Although Iran, I assume, is also building up for a time when they're going to do a coordinated attack on Israel as well. So who knows exactly what Iran's purposes with their proxy militias and terror groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and this Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but they're certainly continuing to do this, and so Israel's fighting back by basically limiting the area that they can fish to put pressure on them. Although I think ultimately what's happening is the regular residents of the Gaza Strip end up being punished because the terrorist organizations who are ruling them effectively continue to do this, and it's probably not going to affect Hamas or the Palestinian Authority very much. They're rich; they can get their food from wherever. I'm sure they can ship it in from Egypt. It's just the regular citizen that is going to be harmed by most of this. But Israel doesn't have a lot of choice in this case in terms of what they can do against it. All right, this one here from jpost.com, Iran seeks way around U.S. sanctions with non-dollar trade. Now, why is this significant? Well, the U.S. is the one world superpower currently, mostly because they own the world's reserve currency, the U.S. dollar. All trade in the world is backstopped by the U.S. dollar. And so the country who owns that world's reserve currency is the superpower. If that world reserve currency is eroded, if it ends up decreasing in popularity as a world reserve currency, if people lose trust in it, then what you have is effectively economic collapse and a monetary switchover. And so when you see countries trying to get away from the U.S. dollar, like Russia has done, like China was trying to do with the yuan, trying to make it the world reserve currency, then you have basically a countdown to the economic collapse of the United States, the removal of them as a world superpower, and potentially the worldwide economic collapse, which leads to all Western nations falling down. And of course, that's exactly what we see, the conspicuous absence of Western nations named in end-time prophetic wars, Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 17, etc. Although I've mentioned in the past, there's maybe a passing comment by them by way of the young lions of Tarshish in Ezekiel 38, but they're just saying words to the Gog-Magog alliance, saying, "Why have you marched on Israel? Are you come to take a spoil?" And that's exactly what's happening in Ezekiel 38. They're coming to take a spoil. It looks as if an economic collapse has happened, or it's in progress, and they don't have food, they don't have money, and they see riches and food and blessings in Israel, so they march on Israel, the alliance, Iran, Russia, Turkey, Libya, Ethiopia, etc. And so they march on Israel, and one of the reasons, one of the hooks in the jaw, is to take a spoil, to get some riches, likely because there's an economic collapse in progress. That's what I think the sequence of events is. It says, Iran's ambassador to London attended a meeting where he discussed the use of Europe's instrument for trade and exchanges to continue trade despite U.S. sanctions. So, of course, the sanctions against oil, Iran can't export any oil, and so they want to get around this. In the works since the U.S. walked away from the JCPOA Iran deal, the concept was created by Germany, France, and the UK in January. The Iranian state media now says Instex is ready to conduct transactions. This comes after meetings in March, and the delegation from Iran's foreign ministry met with Europeans in the UK, which is facing economic hurdles due to the Brexit. So countries in Europe are trying to do deals with Iran because they're in economic trouble as well. And so they're looking to get around U.S. sanctions effectively. And so Iran is working towards that. And this undermines the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency. And this is one of the lead-up factors. We're going to look back at this and say this is one of the factors that led to the downfall of the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency. And this is one of the factors that drew us into worldwide economic collapse and a monetary switchover to a one-world currency, which is spoken of in the Bible. It's also known as the mark of the beast system, where no man can buy or sell save he that has the mark. This world leader comes in. He says he comes in at a time probably during economic collapse or war, and he says we need a world currency to fix the situation. And so the countries of the world, they have no other choice. They're starving. They're desperate. There's civil war, and so all the countries of the world say we will accept a they're not going to call it the mark of the beast, but we will accept a one world currency if we can get this thing straightened out and feed our citizens. And so that's what's going to happen. And that mark of the beast system comes at a time, I think, of significant economic downturn, if not worldwide complete economic collapse. And I think the economic collapse of the world is really the reason why there's no Western nations in end-time Bible prophecy, Revelation, Ezekiel 38, Isaiah 17. You don't see Western nations named at all. The United States, Canada, Australia, any country in Europe, you don't see any of those names. All you see is the Middle East names of countries that are dictatorships, that are run by military rule, etc. These are the countries that won't fall during economic collapse. Only those ruled by military or where there's a dictatorship, because people don't have a choice. But in democratic societies, you have economic collapse, and that takes out the whole country, and then there is no public will to send military anywhere because the military is trying to keep the peace in their own country. So you have a perfect reason and a convergence of events which lines up and sets up Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 17 and all the prophetic battles to happen without the interference, if you will, of Western nations who, at that time, like I say, are starving because they're in the middle of a worldwide economic collapse. I will finish with this here. This is from timesofisrael.com. Palestinians want to discuss U.S. peace plan with Europe. The foreign minister says. Riyad al-Malki says 2 countries could recognize Palestine soon, European countries. Notes efforts to return Guatemalan embassy from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. And so apparently the Palestinians want to talk about the U.S. peace plan, but with Europe. And Palestinians don't like this peace plan, although no one knows the exact details of it. Apparently there will be no two-state solution. Kushner did confirm that this will be coming out from his own words, from his own mouth. This peace plan will be revealed shortly after Ramadan, and so this, from his own mouth, it appears that this is coming out after Ramadan, the holy Islamic month. So mid-June, I believe, is the current scheduled release of this. And there is no Palestinian state, apparently, in here. What you have is some agreements for right of return for the so-called Palestinians, the people who live there, to return to Jordan, maybe some to be accepted into Egypt or other Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries, or maybe to immigrate into Israel legally. But there is no official two-state solution. There are just other agreements. So it's going to be a completely different peace plan, it sounds like. So it's going to be very fascinating to hear it. And the fact that countries don't like it right now, I think bodes well for it, because peace plans in the past, the partners have been on board with it. They've kind of went ahead with it. So I think maybe this signals that there will be something different about this. The fact that none of them like it right now, but they certainly Netanyahu said he has an open mind about it. And so apparently it's going to be a one state coordinated solution, where people of Gaza, the so-called Palestinians, will be able to either move or stay. But if they stay, they got to cooperate with Israel, and there's going to be some financial incentives for them to do one or the other, and there's going to be lots of financial incentives to Jordan, to Egypt, to the other Arab nations to absorb some of these people and to continue to help and push forward and agree to this deal as well, and put the weight of their country and their confidence on the table for that. It says the Palestinians have requested to meet foreign ministers of the European Union state members in the coming weeks to speak to them about the U.S. administration's expected peace plan. And I don't know what the deal is here. I guess maybe to get the European leaders' ideas on this, even though not many of these leaders know much about this, at least according to mainstream media. Maybe they know more than we know already. Trump's administration will publish the anticipated peace plan following Ramadan, which will end at the beginning of June, Jared Kushner, a senior advisor to Trump, said Tuesday at a Time magazine conference. If you watched John Haller, he had a video of Kushner at that Time magazine conference stating that. So PA President Abbas has vowed not to consider any U.S. proposal with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said he will look at the expected American plan. Netanyahu rather said he expected the American plan to look at it rather with an open mind, which is what I said. But Abbas does not like it. He will not consider it. But apparently there are high-level delegates going to Europe to discuss the U.S. peace plan. So who knows what's really going on. I'm sure Abbas is not going to come out and say that we love it until it's officially out and he can read all the fine print of it. Plus, he has to keep looks for his own people, his own countrymen. He's not going to come out and say he's on board with something that would dislocate maybe the civilians in Gaza. And honestly, what their stated goal is to run Israel into the map. They don't want Israel to have any nation at all, and that's one of the big reasons they don't want a peace plan. They don't want peace with Israel. They want Israel. They want the land of Israel. They want Israel to disappear effectively. So there is really no making a peace deal with the so-called Palestinians. And I think that's why the Kushner-Greenblatt team has come up with this alternative solution, not a two-state solution, because the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. But it's going to be a one-state solution with several options for the current residents of those areas, Gaza Strip, etc. Several options for them to take if they prefer, and not to have an option of a two-state solution. So it's an interesting situation, and we're going to have a month of silence apparently through May, and then it's going to be a very interesting time period in June as we look to the release of this U.S. peace plan, which has been long awaited and cannot be put off much longer, because then you have U.S. presidential elections coming up shortly after that, the run-up for the U.S. presidential elections, and they don't want to run into that. They want to keep it separate. They want to release it in a way that they can manage it, where there's not too much media for or against it. They want to manage the whole situation where there's not a lot going on, in terms of Jewish holidays, Islamic holidays, Christian holidays. They want a time period where everybody can digest it in relative peace, and not have the fall period when this is going to be running into the fall period, where you have a whole host of other interesting prophetic time periods and holidays, etc. happening. So interesting setup, interesting stories We know that the Lord is returning soon, and we are to watch the signs of the times, understand the weather that we see in the sky, understand what's coming. And I believe that the Lord is coming soon. This peace plan, the more I listen to it, the more I hear about it, the more I hear about the details of the plan, the more I'm thinking, this could be the plan that is ultimately implemented by the Antichrist figure, and put upon the Middle East, put upon the Palestinians and the Israelis, and really that ushers in the 7-year tribulation, the 7-year period, I should state, the 3.5-year tribulation and the 3.5 years of the wrath of God. So we're getting very close. We're getting very close. We're not there yet, but we see these things coming down the pipe. We're starting to see the picture more clearly now, and it's going to be very fascinating to see what the details of this peace plan is. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll leave it there, and we'll see you guys in the next video.